Hey everyone, it's Tyler from Zephyr Epic here, and welcome to our 2025-26 Upper Deck Series 2 Young Gun Checklist review. In this video, we'll be going over the top Young Guns that you need to know from the set, as well as some sleepers. We'll assign everyone a letter grade, but I won't be talking to every single player, as unfortunately, I just don't have the time to do it right now. We will be doing a more thorough end of year one, just because we did miss Series 1, due to the fact that I was away on paternity leave as I had a kid. So be on the lookout for that once Extended Series comes out. We'll do a full-on recap that goes a little bit more in depth into all of the players, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. We are still using the same methodology and letter grade guide that we have in the past. For those who are unfamiliar with it, we are grading these players from their hobby value standpoint. There are going to be players on this checklist where I'm giving them a lower grade relative to what I think their overall impact is, just because I think that they're going to sell for less over the long term because they're not as flashy, or they play, a more defensive game rather than an offensive game. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad player. It just means that they're not going to have the same level of interest in them from a hobby value standpoint. A good example would be a player like Leo Carlsson, where he had a very similar start to Macklin Celebrini and some other players to begin the year, but his hobby value never really shot up just because he's not quite as flashy. He's more of like that Ryan Getzlaf type mold, where for whatever reason they just don't sell as well. So yeah, the things that I'm looking for when evaluating these players is, again, how flashy, how many highlight reel plays they produce, what their overall scoring is, and especially for defensemen, they need to be one of the best scorers in the league, which is why the grading for defensemen is normally a lot tougher. And I think that's really all I need to mention. The final thing is that where the player is playing will actually dictate a little bit in their grade. For example, if you have the same prospect in Montreal and Toronto, the Habs prospect will typically always outsell the Toronto prospect. And then same thing from like Toronto to other markets, and then even from like Vancouver to other markets, and then so on and so forth, because it can just kind of affect their grade a little bit. One other important note is that I unfortunately did not have the time to break it down by team. So it is just going to be by letter grade. And then within each letter grade, they're just listed alphabetically. There's no actual ranking within them. If you want personal rankings and stuff like that, feel free to ask. I can try and like nitpick for you in the comment section, but for the simplicity's sake of the video, I just listed them alphabetically. I've also included the age at the time of the start of the NHL season for the players, as that can also help evaluate whether or not you want to hold on to a player or sell a player now. All right, let's get into things, and we're starting off with Matthew Schaefer, who gets an S- from me. He has surpassed any and all expectations people had for him entering the season. He has the most goals ever by an 18-year-old defender. He has been excellent defensively and has essentially single-handedly reinvigorated an Islanders team that looked like it was headed for a rebuild into one that might be looking to compete sooner rather than later. While defenders normally don't sell well, Schaefer's ability to dominate both sides of the puck combined with his offensive ability to put the puck in the net will make him a highly sought after rookie and could become the hobby's most valuable defender in the modern hockey card era. And in fact, honestly, he probably should have been on Team Canada at the Winter Olympics with how good he has played this year. So definitely one of the guys that you want to keep an eye out for long term. It is very, very tough for a defenseman to break into that like upper stratosphere where, you see your Crosbys, your McDavids, your Celebrinis right now. So I think he has the potential to kind of be just below that, and that is why he gets an S- for me as a generational type of player. Next up, we have Michael Misa, and while he has had a quiet season production-wise, he's shown that he has a solid two-way game and should carve out a lengthy career as an impact top six center. His ceiling will be slightly limited due to Macklin Celebrini being the Sharks' #1 center for as long as Celebrini wants to be a Shark, but Misa still has the potential to score a lot, and he might get some easier matchups because of Celebrini turning into one of the best players in hockey. The circumstances of his team and who's in front of him is why he gets an A- for me, but I still think he's going to be a very, very solid hockey player for a very long time. Next up in the B+ tier, we have Ben Kindle, Brady Martin, Easton Cowan, and Sam Dickinson. Kindle's been one of the biggest surprises this season, as he's recorded 14 goals and 27 points so far in his rookie season as an 18-year-old. He is a legitimately exciting player to watch, and given his early success, he has legitimate top six potential. I'm not quite sure on whether or not he has first line potential, but he has looked pretty good when he's played alongside Sidney Crosby, although Sidney Crosby makes everyone look good. Brady Martin is a strong physical center who has been described as a Sam Bennett type of player by numerous scouting sites. He's got legitimate top six potential, but I would say he nets out as more of a 2C than a true 1C at the NHL level, and I don't think he'll score enough to really break through in a major way in the hockey card world, so that's again why he gets a B+. While I think Easton Cowan is a very legit NHL prospect and he's put up solid numbers in his rookie season, I think it's more likely that he ends up as a second line player as opposed to a true top of the lineup option. His usage this year has been really suspect with Craig Berube. I think that's more a coaching issue than a player issue, but he's going to have a lot of value on release day due to him being one of the few future pieces that the Leafs have as they enter a bit of a retool. And then rounding out the B+ tier is Sam Dickinson, who is a highly talented blue liner who should be getting a lot of opportunity to be the San Jose Sharks' #1 guy on the back end. He had incredible scoring numbers in the OHL, but that hasn't quite translated to the NHL as a 19-year-old yet. I'm not sure whether or not he'll break through hobby value-wise long term, but if he does hit as a legit #1, the Sharks as a whole could end up being one of the best teams in the NHL for a very lengthy period, and he'll likely be a big part of everything that they do. Moving on to the B tier, and we have Alexander Nikishin, who is a 23-year-old blue liner for the Carolina Hurricanes. If you're familiar with the video game NHL Hits, he plays like he's the best player out of that franchise because he delivers these bone-crunching hits and powerful slap shots, and is just generally an overall monster on the ice. He is one of my favorite players to watch in this rookie crop, but I don't think he'll score enough, nor is he in the right market to be a big money young gun. Braden Coots shocked a lot of people by making the Canucks roster out of training camp. He projects more of a 2C who is a team's captain in a similar form to what Bo Horvat was for the Canucks. I don't expect him to reach into the top tier for value for young guns, but he should be a solid secondary guy, and Vancouver really likes to support their young guns, so that's why he gets a B from me. Is another highly touted Russian forward who the Wild have been using as both a winger and a center in his rookie season. He has legit top 6 upside and even first line upside, especially if he gets a shot with Kirill Kaprizov, but for right now he's kind of more of a middle 6 option, so definitely some scoring potential there and a guy to keep your eye on in case he clicks with the right players. Emmett Finney was a 2023 7th round pick and has been an excellent find for Detroit. He's recorded 21 points in his first 58 games, and given his progression, he could carve out a pretty solid role in the middle 6 of the Detroit Red Wings. I do think given his age and his continued development that it's worth giving him a B rather than a B- or a C+, just because again, he's had consistent growth and has had a really strong rookie season, so he could work his way into that top 6 role. Matvei Gridin is honestly one of my favorite prospects in this crop as well. He's got a really good scoring profile, and his production at every level indicates that there's some potential for him to be a consistent top 6 forward at the NHL level. One of those guys to keep your eye on as well. And rounding out the B tier is Zeev Buyam, who is listed as a Minnesota Wild player on the checklist, but he is now a member of the Vancouver Canucks as he was a key piece of the Quinn Hughes trade. He'll get plenty of looks as a potential top 4 option in Vancouver, and while I think him replacing Quinn Hughes is a stretch, there is some potential for him to become a #1 power play quarterback type of defender. It's just really hard to evaluate any player currently playing in Vancouver because their defensive environment is incredibly horrible and they have some of the worst structure I've ever seen at hockey. So really tough to evaluate him and long term, but I think his overall upside isn't quite into obviously the same Quinn Hughes tier, but maybe that of like your average #1 or #2 defenseman on a team. Moving on to the B- tier, and these are players that I think are B level tier players if they actually hit their potential. I'm just less certain of them hitting it than some of the players above them. There is no better example than Axel Sandin Pellikka for the B- tier, as he's got a lot of dynamic offensive tools that allow him to generate scoring chances at the NHL level, but he's a bit more of a boomer bust option than some of the other defenders due to some of his defensive deficiencies that could limit his playing time. I could see him being a top 4 power play QB for the Detroit Red Wings, but he's also going to be behind Mo Seider and Simon Edvinsson as well, so just some factors there to consider when evaluating him. Again, very talented player, and if he puts his overall package together, he could actually be one of the best defenders in the crop. I'm just a little bit worried about that defensive game not being quite good enough in order to get that playing time. Next up is Dmitry Simashev, who I'm actually a pretty big fan of his overall game, and the defender who recently turned 21 is benefiting a lot from his current stint in the AHL for his long-term development. I think he profiles more of a top 4 shutdown defender than an offensive option, which will probably limit his hobby upside, but it is worth noting he's almost a point per game player at the AHL level, which is really impressive for a 21-year-old defender. Isaiah Coward is a player that I was debating putting in the C+ tier because he kind of struggled with the Oilers to start the season. However, as with any scoring winger prospect for the Oilers, you need to keep your eye out for them in case they pop off alongside Connor McDavid. The 21-year-old has looked really solid in the AHL, and so while I think it's more likely he ends up as a middle 6 forward option if he hits, he's a player that I just hold on to a couple of copies in case he pops off next to McDavid or Draisaitl and stays there for a lengthy period of time because, well, that'll just drive up any player's hobby value. Next up, we have the Schaefer and Gatcomb Teammates Young Guns. This card's very cute. It has the 2 players in the Step Brothers pose and will probably be somewhat valuable because of Schaefer, but again, it's not going to be as valuable as a typical Schaefer Young Gun or even some of the like A or B tier guys, just because not everyone everyone's going to be interested in it, and most people are generally gunning after that key base rookie card, which is Schaefer's just regular young gun. Next up is Michael Brandsegg Nygaard, who is a talented Norwegian forward, and I think is going to be a little bit underrated in this crop. He has been lighting up the AHL as a 20-year-old while also being a pretty reliable two-way forward. To me, he profiles as one of those reliable top 6 forward options who will be one of the glue guys that you stick next to a more offensive player to help cover them up defensively. I just don't know what his overall scoring output is going to be at the NHL level, so that's why I gave him a B-, but I do expect him to just be a generally good impact player at the NHL level. And then finally, rounding out the B-, we have the Misa and Schaefer checklist. I normally don't put the checklist on any grades, but I just think it's worth throwing it on here that I think it's still going to be somewhat valuable on release day because it has Schaefer on it, and he's going to sell well. All right, as we flip over into the C+ to D tier Young Guns, I just want to note that I'm not going to be going over every single one individually. I'm going to be highlighting some of the ones that I think are interesting. And if you've got any questions about any of them, feel free to leave a comment and I will try and get to you as soon as possible on it. I really like Gritsiak's name, and he's got a great game as well. I think he'll carve out a solid middle 6 role at the NHL level. I just think his overall upside is somewhat limited. Suniev is one that I am actually pretty interested about. He's been a pretty prolific scorer at every level he's played at, but has struggled a little bit in adapting to pro hockey this year. His biggest knock is his skating, and if he can actually bring his pace up a little bit, this is a decent chance for him to not only become a good middle 6 option at the NHL level, but a good top 6 forward. Carl Lindbaum has been pretty solid at the AHL level the past 2 seasons, and given Vegas' need for a goalie, if he is able to develop another step, he could find his way into at least a tandem starting role at the NHL level. While I'm not the biggest fan of Harrison Brunick's game, I do think he has a chance to become a top 4 defenseman at the NHL level. I just think his scoring profile won't be high enough to warrant hobby love. Ryan Green has had a decent showing in Chicago this season with 21 points in 59 games. While I think he projects to be more of a solid third line forward, the Blackhawks have been playing him primarily with Connor Bedard, and given that there's a chance he might stick there, he's worth just keeping an eye on just in case, he does end up staying in that top 6 role. Tuskie's unique combination of size, strength, and character will allow him to be a relevant NHLer for longer than any other rookie in this draft class. I mean, that's because he's a mascot, but the point still stands. In all seriousness, he should be at least somewhat valuable because the mascot cards tend to do well, especially with kids. I think Hunter Brustevich is one of the C tier players that you need to keep your eye on because if he does hit, it will be as a top 4 offensive defender. His defensive game still needs a lot of work. However, if he's able to shore that up, he should get some opportunities at the NHL level, given that he's a right shot and is a fairly skilled puck-moving defenseman who can put up points. Yoel Nystrom's had a really strong showing with the Hurricanes this season, and I think he's a legit bottom pairing guy at the NHL level, maybe a fringe number 4, but I don't think he's ultimately going to score enough to generate any hobby value. And the same thing kind of goes for Kirill Kudryavtsev, who's been a solid find for the Canucks as a 7th round pick in 2022. Kudryavtsev was a key cog in the Abbotsford Canucks lineup last year and a big part of why they won the Calder Cup in the AHL. I think if he keeps progressing as he has been, he does have some potential to be a top 4, like a number 4 defenseman in the NHL, but ultimately his upside is going to be somewhat limited because he is on the shorter side of things and NHL coaches tend to like taller defenders, so he's really going to have to perform well in order to get those opportunities. I think he can get there, but that's why he's in the C tier for me because I just don't think he's going to score enough to generate hobby love, and the chances of him hitting that are a lot lower than some other players. Maxim Shabanov has been a really solid player in the KHL over the past few seasons, but that hasn't quite translated over to the NHL level yet. He is a player to keep your eye on in case he does find his game and ends up in a top 6 role, but ultimately I think he's just going to be a third line player. Noah Laba has been a fine third line center for the Rangers so far. I think his peak upside is a fringe second line forward, but he likely settles in as a solid third line option for most of his career. And then Ryan Ufkos had actually a really strong showing in the AHL this year with 11 goals and 44 points in 49 games for a defender. I just don't think his overall track record of scoring is good enough to really get too excited about him yet, but hey, it's worth keeping an eye on him as well. If there was one C- player I think you might want to keep your eye on, it's Marshall Warren. He's been a pretty solid two-way defender, and he's going to get a little bit more opportunity on the Islanders than either of the Hurricanes defenders will get on the Hurricanes. I think both Lejeune and Fensor actually have legitimate upside to their game. the Hurricanes are just so deep that I don't think they're going to get any opportunity there. I also think there's an outside chance that Curtis Douglas has some sort of hobby value just because he's a 6'9" enforcer type of player, and he's going to get a lot of fighting and roughing majors against the Florida Panthers whenever the Tampa Bay Lightning play them. In the D tier, I just want to talk about David Tomaszek for a second because he actually had a lot of promise to start the year. The Oilers gave him a lot of opportunity, especially on the power play with McDavid and Draisaitl, but it just never really amounted to much. He had a really good SHL track record of scoring, but he's since gone back there, so he gets a D just because I don't think he's ever going to come back to the NHL, but he is still a point per game player in the SHL, so really solid pro player, but just didn't have it quite cut out at the NHL level for him. In terms of who's on the young gun canvases, the main one that you want to look out for is obviously Ivan Demidov, but there's quite a few good players, including Buyum, Axel Sandin-Pellikka, Kindle, Snuggerud, Simashev, Nikishin. You got Brady Martin in there. You got Gabe Perreault. You've got Quinn Hudson, who's got some hobby value right now. I ultimately don't think he's going to be that major of a player. But yeah, Yurov, again, Demidov, Brunik is going to be pretty popular. I'm not a big Levshinov fan personally, but he does seem to have some hobby value. I like Gridden. I like MBN, I like Leonard, and Coots and Howard all again have some hobby value, so lots of really good canvas options. Worth noting that there's no Beckett Seneca, and he's going to be probably one of the most valuable young guns in Extended when that comes out later. Actually, the Extended checklist could potentially be really solid with who's left. Overall, the Young Gun crop is really solid in 2025-26 Upper Deck Series 2. You have one clear superstar headliner in Matthew Schaefer. You have a legit first-line forward in Michael Misa. And you have a bunch of really good depth, like second line or top six forward, top four defenseman options throughout the entire checklist. I think it's going to be a very fun product. And again, obviously, Schaefer is going to pull up most of the value. But yeah, in terms of my biggest sleeper for the set, I'm probably going to go with MBN on that one. I really like his game, and I think he's just going to be one of those nice glue guys, and he does have some scoring potential there. In terms of one of the biggest boomer bust options, it's going to be his teammate Axel Sandin-Pellikka. And then, yeah, I'm just looking forward to the set. I'll see you on release day tomorrow. We'll be doing breaks on Whatnot. I'll leave a link in the description to that. There'll be pick your teams, and the teams will be posted right when this video goes live. So feel free to go through and check those out. Again, apologies for a slightly different format. I will make it up for you guys in the end of the year full-on recap. We're going to go a little bit bigger on that and have a little bit more fun, just to go a little bit more in-depth and everything. And I think it could be good to just kind of go through a recap of where players are to see if there's any changes. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like. Feel free to comment down below as well with your thoughts. I'll try to get to as many of them as I possibly can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.